The year was sometime in the distant future, when Earth came more into contact with alien life from other galaxies. There were many changes that came with this wall being broken, some big and some small. But one thing that remained the same was America's love for baseball. Two Little League baseball teams were getting ready for a big game against each other. There was just one problem. They both sucked. But with so little time for training, the organizer decided they would need superhuman help to whip these underdogs into shape. And so they enlisted the help of two new trainers, Garnet, the leader of the Crystal Gems, and Piccolo, the namekian member of the Z Fighters. They were both revered for their mentorship abilities, and both have played baseball, once. Good enough. Both teams found it weird that their new coach wasn't even human, but they were more than willing to give them a chance. Trust me, they needed every chance they could get. So who will prove to be the better coach and lead their team to taking home the gold? Well, there's only one way to find out. Hi there everybody, it's Adam again. Before we begin, I just want to say that you all look fabulous today. And just a reminder, kids, don't be racist. Just treat people with human decency. It's not that hard. God. Sorry, I know you're actually here to see what merits the Crystal Gem has over the Namekian when it comes to training a bunch of human children in baseball. And thankfully for me, she's got quite a few. First off, both of them have experience playing baseball and know the rules and such, but both only have played it once and under similar contexts, so I don't see much point in debating who knows the game better, as they're about the same. What this is really going to come down to is how well they'd be able to apply that limited experience to coaching their teams. In that sense, I think one of Garnet's biggest advantages is that she has a stronger connection to humans from the get-go. Of course, mainly thanks to interacting with Steven and being his square mom. But beyond that, Garnet, just like the other Crystal Gems, has been living on Earth for literally thousands of years, meaning she's had much more time to educate herself on the various cultures of Earth. Especially given how the Crystal Gems were formed in the first place because their leader was enamored by everything it had to offer. Sure, she may not have a perfect understanding of them, but I think it's easy to argue that she'd have an easier time connecting with the human children more, as she's overall friendlier and more patient, was able to bond with Steven and KO, and had at least educated herself on human issues they could be going through, such as body positivity and even racism. Meanwhile, Piccolo didn't start living on Earth until his dad was defeated, which was when Goku was already an adult. So it wasn't that long ago compared to Garnet's time on it, and he simply hasn't shown the same level of connectivity with the youth. Yeah, I know, Piccolo's a better father than Goku, har diddly har. But him training Gohan was, at the end of the day, pretty much just that, training. Sure, he did bond with him and Gohan looked up to him afterwards, but it's not like they got to a point where they were going out for ice cream or anything like that. Aside from that, his only other experience with kids is holding a baby one time. And he never really went out of his way to learn more about the planet he's stuck on, much less what the kids are into or what issues they may be going through. I mean, the dude struggled to grasp other basic aspects of life on Earth, like dressing fashionably and driving. Not that I'm one to talk on the latter, though. And because of that, I feel like Piccolo wouldn't be able to relate to his team as well as Garnet would hers. Of course, being able to connect with the kids doesn't mean anything about how well she'd do at actually coaching them to get better at the game. So, getting right into that, first off, Garnet has leadership skills and experience, being the leader of the Crystal Gems after Rose, who trusted her with that position after her departure, and she is mostly respected as such. In contrast, Piccolo is an experienced member of the Z Fighters, but he doesn't exactly have a leader role or position among them, so he doesn't have that kind of experience under his belt. We've also seen instances of Garnet training and teaching others outside of stuff that relates to Crystal Gem missions, like how she helped out at Little Homeworld to help the newly reformed gems adjust to life on Earth through leisurely activities. And the kicker, one of these activities is baseball. And yeah, sure, it's Amethyst who manages that, but given the other points I had for Garnet, I don't think it's much of a stretch to say she could easily stand in if needed. Or that she could just get some pointers from Amethyst given how they're on the same team. The only time we see Piccolo teaching anyone for anything is for fighting, which would be useful if this were Cobra Kai, but not really as applicable to a game of Little League Baseball. But all these points kind of pale in comparison to Garnet's biggest trump card here.
Future vision.
This allows her to look into the future and see multiple outcomes for an event. And yes, I should state that's by her own volition. It's not a foolproof power or anything like that. But that doesn't mean it's not something that could still give her a huge leg up here. Like, picture it. You got a big game coming up and you got a coach that can just look ahead into the future and see something going wrong, then giving pointers on what to do to avoid it. I'm pretty sure most major league teams would kill for a coach with that kind of power. And it could even help them strategize against anything Piccolo has up his sleeves. Well, metaphorically speaking. So with all that in mind, I think my favorite fusion's got a pretty good shot at taking home a Little League trophy. But now I'll hand the mic over to the giant cucumber side. Just remember, always keep one eye open, even if you have 3 of them.
Whoops.
You'll never succeed. You're too weak.
I love both of these characters, and I think they both do a great job at training their teams, but I think Piccolo's going to excel here way more than Garnet would. Let's address Garnet's biggest advantage right off the bat, her future vision. That'd give her the win automatically, right? Well, not exactly. Piccolo's able to communicate via telepathy, which involves him being able to read minds. So even though he wouldn't have anything visual to go off like with future vision, or know how well each team's strategies would plan out, he would still know any and all strategies that Garnet's team would try ahead of time, and adapt his own team strategy to work around it. This also means that Garnet can never have a leg up on Piccolo in regards to her knowledge of the sport. Anything that Garnet can learn, Piccolo can nab right from her and add it to his own knowledge. Worst case scenario, Piccolo knows the exact same amount as Garnet, but in the more likely scenario, he knows everything she does and then some. He could even read the minds of those in the audience to gain the baseball knowledge of hundreds of fans of the sport, widening the gap in that area even further. So this means future vision and mind reading cancel each other out in regards to figuring out each other's strategies, right? Nope, Piccolo's telepathy should still edge out. Garnet's future vision isn't always the most reliable. It doesn't show her the exact scenario that will definitely play out. It shows her a multitude of possible futures that she has to decipher herself which is most likely, which can and even has been influenced by her own perception of the people and things around her. When Steven was growing up and she didn't account for that, her future vision kept getting thrown off and it essentially sent her into an anxiety attack. Telepathy isn't even Piccolo's only option to know everything that Garnet's going to tell her team. His sense of hearing is insane. At bare minimum, he's able to pick up on really quiet sounds that others right next to him don't. And in the first Broly movie, he says his ears can let him hear anything across the universe. Maybe a slight exaggeration, but at the very least he can hear conversations from people in completely different areas to him. Since he picked up on Goku's conversation with King Kai, which he was nowhere near, Garnet isn't getting anything past him. Now, let's ignore their, for lack of a better word, cheating for a minute. Which of the two would be able to strategize better? Well, brace yourself for this one. The guy debating for Piccolo thinks that Piccolo is going to do better in that area. No, it's okay, I'll give you a minute to process that. I know stats are almost irrelevant here since Piccolo and Garnet themselves aren't actually competing, but Piccolo's massively faster than light speeds would still help him. He could basically cover the entire field, analyze the situation of every player, and come up with new strategies all before anyone else would be able to tell that he had even moved. But it's not about how quickly they can come up with strategies, it's about how good the strategies actually are. And again, Piccolo has the edge there. Garnet's smart, don't get me wrong, but she's never had to think her way out of situations nearly as difficult as Piccolo's found himself in. His fight against Frost goes to show the kinds of insurmountable odds he can still overcome. Goku straight up told Piccolo, "No, you have no chance of winning this fight." And then he went and did it anyway. Or he would have if Frost didn't cheat. My final point is a stat-related one. Not Garnet or Piccolo's stats, no. Those aren't important, but yes, to cover all my bases and stop anyone from commenting this, Piccolo could quite easily kill Garnet. There you go. But if we want to actually turn this into a stat game, let's compare their hypothetical teams of kids. See, humans in Dragon Ball are still able to use Ki in order to raise their own power level. It takes training to learn how to utilize it, but Piccolo's still the only one of the two who would even know how to begin to train them in that regard. He actually has some experience in that field since he trained Gohan when he was a child. His methods were not the nicest, but he's an entirely different person now essentially, so his training wouldn't be nearly as brutal as it once was. It's a change he kind of had to get used to. I mean, he was basically the designated babysitter of Gohan, Goten and Trunks whenever their parents weren't around. He's even shown that he's actually kinda good with kids now. He even sometimes babysits Pan for Gohan and Videl. He's a big softie and just doesn't want anyone to know it. Garnet on the other hand wouldn't know where to even begin with Ki training, or even know that it's an option in the first place. So yeah, Garnet's team would probably have a more enjoyable time with their training, but I think Piccolo's team is going to yield better results. They don't need to be flying and shooting Ki blasts, but I think just being able to tap into enough of their Ki to give them a physical boost should be more than enough to leave Garnet's team in the dust. I can see both teams putting up a good effort, but Piccolo's who I'm betting my money on to train his team up to hit as many home runs as possible. I do have more arguments to bring forward, but I'll take a few minutes to charge those up and give Adam a chance to defend his side again.
Yes, yes, I can win! I feel great! I can do this!
Okay, I was going to open up the second part with Stronger Than You, but I decided against it on account of not subjecting the audience to my awful singing. I am definitely no Estelle. Regardless, you brought up some pretty good points for the Pickster, but obviously we both still have an argument section left, so I'm not conceding yet. First off, the whole stat thing. Yes, Piccolo would absolutely win if this were a standard versus match, no questions about that. But like you even admitted yourself, that's all pretty much irrelevant in this scenario. Sure, Piccolo can move at faster than light speeds and blow up moons, but how's that going to help him train up a Little League team? The kids certainly aren't going to be able to keep up with that, especially not on such short notice. And even if we do assume they could tap into Ki, you might as well give them steroids at that point. In fact, he'd probably just get accused of doing that and get disqualified. Even then, he's still got impatient training just one kid like that, so doing that with a whole Little League team would probably be more than he can handle. And Piccolo doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who would use his speed like Metro Man for something as relatively mundane as this. In fact, we've never seen anyone in Dragon Ball use their speed like that, so I have no idea why that idea would even cross his mind. I'll admit that I did sell short on Piccolo's mind reading and strategizing abilities, but likewise, I think you're not giving Future Vision its dues. Yeah, Garnet has admitted it's not reliable and can be messed with, but still, being able to see every possible outcome would be a pretty frickin' useful power when planning and training for a sporting event. Piccolo mind-reading the kids to learn more about baseball isn't going to be too useful since he'll just know as much as they do. And mind-reading the people in the bleachers would be kinda redundant because that implies the game's already started. So either they already figured it out, or Piccolo just now thought to do that and has to somehow teach the kids on the spot. You say Garnet would have to influence things in order to get the outcome she wants, but there are times when she's been able to use it a lot more effectively and on the fly. Like when she used it as a Smash Bros. Counter move against Strike. And this could also potentially clue her in that Piccolo would try to read her or her team's mind to give her a chance to prepare around that, as well as change up her strategies on the fly if she senses her team losing would be more likely. Last thing I'll admit to is that I underestimated Piccolo's ability to connect with humans, especially kids. But even if he's better about it now, I still think Garnet has a clear advantage here. Again, she's been on Earth for thousands of years and actively gotten involved in human affairs along with her team. And in more modern times, she's shown to be willing to take on a more role model position with kids, as well as just being generally easier to get along with. Versus Piccolo, who's been on Earth for like a couple decades, mostly just hung out with a small group of people, and his experience with kids is training Gohan to fight and babysitting. Neither of which would really translate well to coaching baseball, which, again, they actually do at Little Homeworld. And if it wasn't obvious from that, I still say that Garnet's kids would be more willing to be coached under her than Piccolo's kids would be to him. She's just in general shown to be more laid back and patient while still maintaining authority, and has actively taken on a mentorship role before. I wouldn't really say the same for Piccolo. Even with him being better with kids now, I imagine he'd still be the stricter of the two here, and as such could come off colder, especially if his patience gets tested, which it very easily could. Despite what people say about that method of training, I think all that'd do is lower morale for his team. I've seen enough of these cheesy baseball flicks to know that the laid-back underdog somehow always does a better job against a super strict and serious coach. So yeah, I'd say Garnet's got this in the bag, especially if we do consider her the underdog here with the whole stats thing. Of course, none of this is to say it'll come easy to her. Piccolo does have a lot of clear advantages I admit I didn't account for. But while Garnet's may not be as blatant or big, there's still a lot of little things in her favor that I think will add up to more than Big Green's does. And I believe she has what it takes to bring her team home. World. Maybe not there. Okay, that was a bad pun.
Not gonna lie, when I first read the Metro Man comparison in the script, my mind immediately went to Piccolo juggling the children on his team. I don't know why I thought that, but it's funny to me. Anyway, I've had time to build up my point, so I can get into my rebuttals now. I'll admit I didn't really give Future Vision its due credit, but my point isn't that Future Vision isn't going to be useful. It's that it's still fallible while Piccolo's mind reading and hearing aren't. Garnet can see a multitude of possible outcomes, but she can never know for sure what they're actually going to do. She herself can process so many possible outcomes, but how do you expect her to relay that information to her team during the game when they're out on the field? It would take way too long and it would be way too much information for the kids to handle at once. Piccolo can hear exactly what the other team is saying and thinking at any given time. He only has to feed one game plan back to his team in order to work around what Garnet's gonna do, and his telepathy will let him do that at basically any point. Even if one of his players is on the other side of the field, he can still communicate to them without anyone else being able to hear it. Also, he has more options than just mind reading Garnet's team during the game. He can easily scout her out before the game starts and learn what she knows with plenty of time to spare. He could even look for professional baseball players and learn what they know, giving him a far superior knowledge of the sport than what Garnet would be able to learn on her own. As for the thing about using his speed like Metro Man, I don't see why not. He's never done it in the past before, but that's because anytime he would have any reason to, his opponents in question have been way above him. If it's an option that's possible and would give him a better idea of how to instruct his team, I don't think he's going to pass on that just because it's something he hasn't done before. Even if he doesn't do it in this specific way, it doesn't mean he's not able to analyze events and come up with counter strategies at a way faster rate than Garnet can. Garnet's team has been more involved with human culture as of late, sure, but not that much. She and the rest of the gems were still pretty closed off from the rest of civilization before Greg showed up. Her being on Earth for thousands of years doesn't matter much, when the vast majority of that time was spent fighting corrupted gems and not much else. In the same way that Kami being part of Piccolo wouldn't help much even though he'd been observing Earth for centuries. Even when Garnet did start getting more involved with Greg and his music, it's not like she was adept at every aspect of human culture. Even over a decade later when Steven was in his early teens, she still had no idea how to talk to people and cracked under pressure in regular conversations. And like you said, Amethyst is the one that ended up becoming the baseball coach. It's true that Garnet can just get Amethyst to help her out, but bringing their friends into the equation just makes it so that Piccolo can call on Yamcha, an actual professional baseball player. So it would seem to me that Piccolo has far more useful people that could give him a hand. Ironic since this is Yamcha we're talking about. My point with the kids unlocking Ki was never that they'd be able to match Piccolo's stats himself, or even that they'd be able to move at supersonic speeds, but if they're able to move, let's say, twice as fast and hit the baseballs twice as far as the other team, I would say that is a massive point in their favour, and I don't think it could be compared to steroids to get them disqualified. Any physical boost would stem from their own natural life energy, so there wouldn't be anything to pick up on in drug tests. As far as anyone else is concerned, it'd just be a case of Piccolo's team being more athletic and better trained. Even if Piccolo wouldn't know where to start in drawing out their Ki, he could always just have Gohan help him. He was able to teach Videl to fly in a relatively short amount of time after all, and Gohan's a nice guy. I'd imagine he'd be about as gentle in all this as Garnet would be. Hell, while we're on the topic of people who can help them, I mentioned Yamcha already being a professional baseball player, but there's Hercule Satan as well. He doesn't even have to do anything. Just endorse Piccolo's team, and I'm sure the players and their parents would be motivated to do well and get in the good books of the guy who saved the world. Oh, and one last thing, like I said, I do know that Piccolo winning in a fight isn't important here. I just really want to make sure the chances of getting comments like that are as low as possible. They're much more common on the show than you'd expect. This is where I'm going to end things off. Garnet will definitely coach her team well, and her kids will most likely have a better time than Piccolo's, but Piccolo has the right abilities to know exactly what Garnet's team's going to do, the quick wit to come up with a different strategy around it, and if all else fails, he might just be able to turn his kids into a group of superhumans. This turned out to be a shorter episode than usual, but I'd like to avoid going down the route of either of these series and keep the filler to a minimum. Piccolo's got this in the bag, and after his victory, every May 9th will be celebrated as Piccolo Day. This video is dropping on the exact opposite end of the year as May 9th, isn't it?
No matter how strong the foe or how many there are, we'll stand together and keep pushing all the way.
Take a moment to think of just leaving a comment about who you think wins. Here comes a debate. I'm sorry, I'm not good at outros.
I mean, neither am I, but at least I'm not breaking out into song.
Right, remind me to never do that again. But that's it for our debate, and now we want to hear from you guys. Who's scoring the winning home run? Team Fusion or Team... Pickle?
You say that like Piccolo isn't also a fusion. Actually, he's 3 people in one as opposed to Garnet's 2. So he wins there as well. 2 wins for the price of 1. This episode alone is going to put me on a winning streak. Anyway, leave your predictions in the comments for us to go over in part 2, and check out the Galaxy Video Patreon and the Multiverse's Discord server linked in the description. We'll see you all in the next exciting episode of Galaxy Grudge Match.
Jilly Teed!